It's gonna be me.
We're so used to seeing our favorite Disney characters just as they are that it's hard to imagine them looking any other way. Ready to see what your favorite characters could have looked like? Let's get into it.
Come on, I'll show you some more stuff.
Number 1. We know we're not supposed to talk about him.
Silencio, Bruno!
Silencio, Bruno!
But we'll make an exception to show you the major transformation Bruno went through before hitting the big screen. Bruno went through other phases that made him look totally unrecognizable. From younger to older and bigger to smaller, there were many Brunos along the way, but
even if I wanted to, which I don't,
we couldn't talk about any of them. Number 2. We can all agree that Sisu from Raya and the Last Dragon is one cool-looking Disney character. When we see how she could have looked though, we're actually not sure why the creators changed her. Sisu didn't look too different from how we're used to seeing her, but we still love this more colorful look on her.
How does she change?
Number 3. It's hard to imagine a character that conveys sadness any better than Inside Out did. Come on, just look at her. But seeing some early sketches of sadness proves that this character was going to be perfectly sad and get all our sympathy no matter what. Maybe it was good that they didn't opt for some of the earlier iterations though. This version is just way too cute to watch her being sad all the time. Number 4. Onward's Ian Lightfoot looks like a regular teenager, in elf form of course, but he almost looked a lot elfier. Check out his bleach blonde hair in this early drawing. Number 5. Looks like major character design changes run in the Lightfoot family. Ian's mom, Laurel, didn't always have the short blue hair and glasses that she has in the movie. She almost had long blonde locks and a much, shall we say, groovier outfit. According to Onward's character supervisor Jeremy Talbot though, the like-mother-like-son appearance changes were no accident. Talbot says that Laurel has a little bit of Ian in her and a little bit of Barley too. As all 3 characters evolved, it was like a dance to keep it all balanced.
Splinter.
Number 6. The titular character in the movie LUCA also went through his fair share of different versions before landing on his final fish form.
This is the greatest drawing I've ever seen!
Yeah, I know.
While over time LUCA had many different shades of green with different features, he was always super cute.
What?
Number 7. Pixar's Turning Red is all about Mei Lee, a girl who turns into a red panda. Interestingly though, that red panda wasn't always exactly as we know her now. She had a few different looks along the way. Always red though. That was kind of the whole point.
Whoa, May.
You're you! And you look amazing!
Number 8. It's pretty hard to imagine our favorite Ice Queen from Frozen looking different at all. But she actually could have looked very different. Did you know that Elsa was once Frozen's villain instead of the protagonist?
Don't be the monster they fear you are!
And back when her character was very unrecognizable, so was her look. She was older and, well, meaner, and she was, at one point, actually modeled after none other than Bette Midler. She even had blue skin. But when the famous Let It Go was written, Frozen's creators realized that Elsa wasn't evil at all, just misunderstood. She went through a physical change.
Whoa, Elsa, you look different.
But she still wasn't the icy icon she is today. She actually had short black hair. We agree with the creator's ultimate choice though. Elsa just wouldn't be Elsa without that braid flip.
You look beautiful. Thank you. You look beautifuler. I mean, more beautiful. Thank you.
Number 9. Counselor Jerry from Soul definitely stood out in terms of character design. While Jerry was far less complex than the other characters, it's clear by their early sketches that they still went through many iterations before ending up with the final design.
Oh, this one might be a handful.
Number 10. Many folks love Moana for having a body that looks more like, well, a human body. We've come to expect that Disney princesses often have bodies that aren't exactly representative of most real people, and some waistlines that would not physically support the weight of a human head. Cough, bell, cough. Excuse me.
Some people use their imagination.
Moana's proportions are a lot more realistic. Or her body proportions are anyway. She still has absolutely massive eyeballs, but Moana originally had an exaggerated thin body type like most Disney princesses. We're really happy they changed this one.
Who are you meant to be?
Number 11. Can you imagine a hippie Ariel? Well, we almost got one. The Little Mermaid originally looked completely different. She had an open vest, yellow eyes, and even a pink tail instead of her signature green. No matter how she looked though, Ariel was always a redhead. Number 12. Ariel wasn't the only character from The Little Mermaid that underwent an extreme makeover. So did its villain. Before she was an octopus, she was a scary, skinny mermaid with green hair. Her look was inspired by a scorpion fish, making her tall and thin and creepy in a totally different way. Then the artist switched gears and went for a punk Ursula with a pink mohawk and some amazing eyelash extensions. We wish we were kidding. Ursula's final look was definitely the right choice in our books. Number 13. Mulan wasn't like other princesses, and she wasn't drawn like them either. It was important to the artist that Mulan could look like a guy when she was in the army, since that's a major plot point. For this reason, Mulan's design was pretty consistent over time, though her face did change slightly. It's still surprising that Li Shang didn't catch on though. Mulan was pretty obvious that she was playing a character quite a few times.
You will assemble swiftly and silently every morning.
Damn!
Number 14. Do you see any similarities between Tinkerbell and Marilyn Monroe? Well, Tinkerbell was originally created by Mark Davis, the same artist who created Cruella de Vil. Tinkerbell was originally pin-up inspired, specifically meant to look like Marilyn Monroe. At first, Tinkerbell was drawn to have red hair and a very different outfit before getting her signature green color palette.
What did she say?
She says you're a big ugly girl.
Oh, I think she's lovely.
Number 15. Speaking of Cruella de Vil's character design, this fan-favorite villain had a major transformation too. She was originally a young and glamorous fashion designer and heiress. When Mark Davis came on board though, she became the Cruella we all know and love. Know and hate. It is interesting though that no matter how old she was always going to have that black and white hair. Number 16. Cruella isn't the only lady villain who we couldn't imagine looking another way. Maleficent is also a bad gal with an iconic appearance. But this Sleeping Beauty villain was actually going to be a witch with antennae at first. Once again though, Mark Davis came in to save the day. He turned those antennae into the classic horns and made that hunched over hag into a glam evil queen. We love an evil glow-up.
You poor simple fools, thinking you could defeat me! Me!
Number 17. The Lion King's diabolical antagonist Scar also got an evil glow-up of his own. In every iteration, Scar always looked super scary, but he was originally also more cartoonish and abstract. After Scar was changed from that cartoony-looking lion, he went way in the other direction, looking a lot more like a real live lion who would absolutely push his own brother off a cliff without thinking twice. Since The Lion King was meant to be appropriate for kids though, it's good that there was one more transformation in Scar's future. From a Scar who wasn't realistic enough to a Scar who was a bit too realistic, they finally ended up with a Scar who was just right. In all the wrong ways, of course.
Scar. Drop him.
Impeccable timing, Your Majesty.
Number 18. From the Pride Land's worst brother to the ocean's best friend, let's take a look at how much Sebastian changed from his original art. Can you believe that Sebastian was originally green with a patterned shell? Yes, Sebastian used to look entirely different. And while he did match better with that older version of Ariel, we're happy that he changed completely. Crabs are usually red, right? Number 19. From one little red sidekick to another, Mulan's pal Mushu could also have looked totally different. He was once shorter and way sillier looking. Since this sketch is only in black and white, we don't know if Mushu also could have been green, but we do know that it would have totally changed the movie if Mushu looked like this.
Hey, get out of there! You're gonna make people sick!
Number 20. Let's be real, how much would a different looking King Triton actually have changed The Little Mermaid? You'd be surprised. Seriously, can you imagine King Triton looking like he's part of some sort of bizarre motorcycle gang? Well, he almost did. Ariel's dad originally had a shaved head, no beard, and was less buff than we're used to seeing him. Plus, he looks way less royal without his signature crown and trident. And that really long mustache? No comment. Number 21. When Aladdin was just an idea and not yet one of our all-time favorite Disney movies, the beloved main character was actually going to be a teenager. Of course, as a younger character, he looked very different. Luckily, he transformed into the older, crush-worthy character we've come to know.
Let's work with me here.
Ooh, I like it muy much.
Why did they age him up, though? Because they decided to give Aladdin a romance with none other than... Number 22. Princess Jasmine, Aladdin's famous magic carpet ride partner. But when Aladdin was going to be a teenager, Jasmine was going to be a totally different character too. She was older and looked more harsh and stuck up. She went through a lot of costume and hair changes, and we're happy she did. These two characters were totally made for each other. Literally. Number 23. Name a more iconic duo than Sully and Boo. We'll wait. But would this pair have been so iconic if Boo was older? We really don't think so. Yet Boo was close to being older with red hair and glasses. And during this phase, Sully had a much more plain, less teddy bear-like look.
Go ahead. Go grow up.
Number 24. Can you imagine Woody from Toy Story as a Disney villain? We certainly can't. But Woody was actually originally meant to be a bad guy. In that version, he looked like a marionette puppet and was super short and mean-looking. We're so happy we got our lovable Woody instead of this weird little guy.
You are a sad, strange little man, and you have my pity.
Number 25. The genie from Aladdin is definitely who we think of when we think of genies, right? Well, his iconic look could have been very different and, very weird. He was originally green instead of blue and had some sort of crystal ball belly situation by the looks of this drawing.
A genie? That's terrible.
Besides just making the genie a lot less disturbing, they also altered him to look more like his beloved voice actor Robin Williams.
Let's get real here, it's not gonna happen.
Number 26. The Beast is a character whose appearance is super important to the story he's in. Beauty and the Beast would have changed drastically if the Beast looked different. In his design, it was important to walk the narrow line of a humanized character who was, well, not human. There were lots of different versions of the Beast, inspired by different animals before the creators landed on their final choice. Versions of the Beast looked like monkeys, gorillas, and even a bit like he could have been related to Pumbaa from The Lion King. Ultimately, the Beast is mainly modeled after a buffalo, but of course he has some much-needed human qualities as well. Belle wouldn't have fallen in love with a regular buffalo, right? Please say right.
Voila! Oh, you look so
stupid.
Number 27. Hercules Hades is one of the funniest, if not the funniest Disney villain there is. Making a guy who's in charge of the underworld funny wasn't an easy task, but the creators pulled it off flawlessly. Originally, he looked more like the devil, red with horns, but to be honest, based on this art, we think it would have been pretty funny this way too.
This is an audience or a mosaic? Hey, how you doing? Looking good, nice dress.
Number 28. Aurora from Sleeping Beauty is known for her long blonde locks and her tendency to sleep through movies, even when she's the main character. While she was of course always meant to have a penchant for snoozing, she almost had long black hair. She always had a waist that was narrower than her own neck though. Some biologically impossible things never change. Number 29. We all know the kittens from the Aristocats, Marie, Toulouse, and Berlioz.
Why should you be first? Because I'm a lady, that's why.
Original sketches of the Aristocats portrayed them as much fluffier kittens, and we think it would have been totally fine if they went with this design. These little cuties are an adorable trio either way. Number 30. We all know that Alice in Wonderland is a super surreal film. Alice herself, though, is fairly realistic. But originally, Alice was a bit surreal looking too. Her first design looked younger and much more cartoonish. And honestly, she was super cute in that OG drawing.
Oh, that was lovely.
Number 31. While the idea behind Jane from Tarzan's look was always the same, she originally looked like a completely different person. She looked more realistic, had red hair, and didn't have that classic yellow dress. When Minnie Driver became her voice actor, though, Jane Porter got a makeover to make her look more like Driver.
Oh, look, bananas! I can't believe you fell for that one.
Number 32. Snow White is known for being innocent and sweet, but she wasn't always that way. In her first iteration, Snow White was actually inspired by Betty Boop, who is known for being on the flirtier side. Snow White was actually only 14 years old, though. Yes, 14 years old. So maybe being entirely Betty Boop-based wouldn't have been the best choice. We can still see the similarities in the hair, though.
Lips red as the rose, hair black as ebony, skin white as snow.
Number 33. Dumbo is a little elephant with giant ears. That's his whole thing. But it actually took a ton of work to land on Dumbo's final look. His head and ear proportions changed repeatedly before he became the little elephant that could. And as much as we love Dumbo the way he is, we have to admit, all of these versions were super cute. Can you imagine how our favorite Disney movies would have changed if they'd gone with the OG character designs? What did you think of the changes that were made? We want to hear all about it in the comments. If you think all of your favorite animated characters look the same around the world, we're here to prove you wrong. Let's look at why certain countries put their own twist on characters that we thought we knew so well. Number 1. The first one is almost as cool as the changes to our favorite Inside Out characters, but more on that in a minute. Let's start with Jeff Gorvette in the Cars franchise. If you're a fan of professional racing, you'll notice that these cars were changed according to famous race car drivers in these countries. In the US, Jeff Gorvette is voiced by Jeff Gordon, a former stock car driver. In Spain, Gorvette turns into Fernando Alonso. In real life, Alonso is a Formula One world champion. In the Chinese version, his name is Long Ge, and we think you can tell which flag he looks like too.
You're just realizing that?
Number 2. Minty ZAKI wasn't the center of attention in Wreck-It Ralph, so you might have missed this change if you watched it in the Japanese version of the movie. In the US, Minty ZAKI looks like this, with a green tracksuit and bow in her hair, and she's named after a film animator called Hayao Miyazaki. In Japan, she wears a pink kimono and has a bun and fringes down her face. Number 3. Buzz gives a speech in Toy Story 2 where the US flag appears in the background while the national anthem plays. In other versions, a globe replaces the flag, and the song by Randy Newman, One World Anthem, plays instead. Number 4. What is one of Michelangelo's most distinctive characteristics? If you guess nunchucks, you're on target. In the US and other countries, they're a staple weapon for this Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle. But in the UK, his nunchucks were seen as too violent to be present in the franchise. So, Michelangelo's weapons were replaced by some sort of turtle-shaped grappling hook. Number 5. You might have seen several different versions of this Plains character depending on where you watched it. Rochelle's appearance in Plains changed in several countries, like in China. Her colors are clearly changed to look like the Chinese flag, and her name is Yun Fei. For Germany's version, not only are the colors reflective of their culture, but her name is Heidi. Australians put their twist on Rochelle too. Did you spot the kangaroo on her side?
She is like a sunrise after a lifetime of darkness.
Number 6. Fans of Pokemon might remember this character change due to its controversy. Japanese Pokemon animators introduced the character of Lenora as a gym leader and dressed her in an apron. Fans, mostly in Western regions and others outside of Japan, pointed out how this character's costume was problematic in the way it was presented in the animation. After the backlash, the apron was changed to a white dress, and most of the references to cooking were removed too. Number 7. If you watch Zootopia in the US or Canada, anchor Peter Moosebridge read the mammal news for you in this scene. But in other countries, Moosebridge was swapped out completely. Check out all of the different animals that were used depending on where they live in the world. A koala in Australia and New Zealand, a jaguar in Brazil, and even a panda in China. You probably guessed that the famous news anchor Peter Mansbridge voiced Peter Moosebridge. That one isn't so subtle. But oddly enough, he actually voices the unnamed panda in the Chinese version too.
Yeah, what does that mean?
Number 8. Inside Out got a very specific change in Japan for this scene. Here, Riley turns away broccoli because the disgust character in her mind, well, finds it disgusting. But apparently in Japan, children find green peppers much more revolting. So if you look closely, filmmakers switched one green veggie for another. Talk about localizing every detail. Number 9. Inside Out got another slight change in different countries. During this dinner scene, Riley's dad is daydreaming about hockey. That's pretty reliable if your country is a fan of hockey like the US, Canada, and Russia. But for other countries, soccer is way more popular. That's why in all other versions of the movie, this is what Riley's dad sees. Number 10. In the first movie, The Incredibles opens with the French villain Bon Voyage. It's pretty clearly a play on words for the French expression bon voyage, have a nice trip. But in the country this villain is actually from, he gets a name change. In France, filmmakers named him Fol Amour, or Strange Love. It was a good call considering the translation of bomb in Bon Voyage wouldn't have made much sense for French audiences. Number 11. Everybody who loved Shrek as much as we did remembers Doris, the ugly stepsister and bartender. In the US version, the stepsister is voiced by Larry King, who of course is known for his deep voice, which makes this scene all the more comical. In the UK though, the character is voiced by another famous talk show host, Jonathan Ross. This is again a case of appealing to local audiences with more local stars.
Hey, how's it going?
Number 12. And finally, we've got a second change to the Cars franchise. This time we're looking at Lightning's agent Harv, who we don't actually get to see in the movie. In the US, Harv is voiced by American actor Jeremy Piven. In the UK, however, the agent is voiced by a well-known British broadcaster named Jeremy Clarkson. His version of Harv even changes some of the lines in the movie to include the word mate instead of kid, like this one.
Come on, kid, get in the trailer. Come
And there you have it. It's pretty cool to think of all the ways different countries have been experiencing some of these iconic characters. Which change surprised you the most on our list?
You look different. I feel different.
The Incredibles animation was groundbreaking for 2004, but The Incredibles 2 was on a whole other level. When watching, did you notice the major animation differences between the two films?
Oh my god, yes.
Number 1, he got more detailed features. There are only mere seconds separating the events of the first and second Incredibles films, which means visually the character's appearance really shouldn't change. But naturally with better animation comes changes, especially with Dash. His looks change drastically between the films. If you look at the side-by-side comparison, not only does his face and clothing look more texturized, but they've also given him more noticeable freckles and a slightly changed hairstyle to become more realistic. You can even see that they altered the shape of his face. When it comes to the animation of Dash's dashing in Incredibles 2, it's undeniably more smooth and more seamless than in the first film.
Did you wash your hands with soap?
Number 2, a newly designed baby. Just like his older brother, Jack has his appearance altered as well.
Are you seeing this, Robert?
We get to see a lot more of him in the second film, and from his added screen time, you can see that Jack's skin looks more realistic in terms of texture and clothing. His hair, the little he has, looks thicker, is animated to move more naturally, and even has a more realistic color. One other detail we spotted was his ears. In the 2004 film, Jack's ears stick out a little more than in Incredibles 2. There are also slight changes to his facial features. While overall it looks like Jack, his facial features and how they move are more realistic in the 2018 film. Number 3, more than just a new headband.
You look different. I feel different.
Moving on to Dash and Jack's sister Violet. This Incredible already has a slight appearance change in the first film when she opens up and is able to truly be herself. It's symbolized by her no longer wearing her hair in front of her face. If we look at this scene in the first and second film side by side, we can notice differences right away. The first thing that sticks out is the changes in her expressions. While her face moves in a way that is still violent, you can tell how animators were able to soften these movements to make them look more human versus cartoonish. Her facial features, especially her eyes, are brought down in size compared to her 2004 version. Moving to her hair, there's more texture in the new version and her hair movements. The bounces you see when she turns resemble real hair more closely. Last but not least, her shirt coloring is slightly different from The Incredibles. Number 4, Bob looks different. Mr. Incredible, also known as Bob, took a backseat to superheroing in the second film to really focus on that hashtag dad life. But that wasn't the only thing that changed about him. The head patriarch of the Incredibles family got an animation glow up as well. You can see here that his face looks like it's been completely reconstructed. His chin and jaw are shaped slightly differently, and there are more details to his skin, facial features, and hair. There's even a subtle shift in the shape of his body, more specifically his shoulders. Number 5, they stuck to the basics. It seems like animators really wanted to stick to what the audience knows and loves about Elastigirl, considering she has the least animation changes over everyone in the film. However, she is slightly different. It looks more realistic in terms of texture and movement. There are some tiny changes to her face shape as well. It's a little more rounded and proportioned in The Incredibles 2. Number 6. Honey, why am I animated differently? Frozone came back strong in the second Incredibles, with creators giving us some more of his cool personality. However, while his attitude remained the same, his animation did not. His facial features are much more detailed, especially if you pay close attention to his facial hair. Look at that texture and realism. His iconic blue shirt is also animated slightly differently, including the coloring. Number 7. Wouldn't want to be his babysitter. We only got glimpses of Jack's powers in the first Incredibles film. Maybe a little more if you watch the extra features on the DVD release, but not nearly as many minutes as Jack's powers got in the second film, which means animators needed to get his power animations just right, especially his weird red devil, or is he just a demon, form. First off, the animators decided to keep his coloring somewhere between human and demon instead of the stark red they used in the first film. His transition into the demon form is also slightly different when you look at how his facial features morph. The teeth are also in different spots and are shaped differently. Number 8, she got herself together Edna definitely took her own advice and got herself together in the second film, courtesy of the animators, of course. Like the Incredibles gang, her looks got a little upgrade as well. The animation of her hair is more realistic in terms of texture, just like many of the other characters. Her glasses are also slightly different, small and more realistic. Overall, she looks way more like her own character and way less like Shrek's Lord Farquaad. Number 9. Crisp and clean. Animators even went as far as upgrading the beginning Incredibles intro. If we look at them side by side, there are obvious changes made to support the number 2 for the second film, but there are also animation differences. The coloring is slightly different and the way the symbol moves, or should we say glides, is smoother. Number 10. She renovated. Edna's home was arguably one of the best parts of the first film. Who can forget the iconic scene of Edna showing off the secret supersuit she had created for the family, including Jack Jack? But Edna's home plays an entirely different role in the second film, arguably a more important one, which apparently resulted in some slight animation changes. While the entrance of her home is recognizable in this shot, you can tell the creators spent a lot of time shifting around the lighting. This could have been a stylistic choice by animators, or maybe they wanted to shift the mood using the lighting to better match the vibe of the film. What do you think? Number 11. Meet me at the bleachers. We looked at this side-by-side comparison when talking about Violet's changes. But now let's focus on the background of this track meet. The fields and bleachers behind Violet and Tony have been given much more detail, especially when it comes to the texture of the stadium walls and floors and even others in the audience. You can also see they added numbers next to the rows of the bleachers that weren't there in the first film. Number 12. Even the villains got a makeover. Guess you could say the Incredibles animators were truly in their villain era when working on the installment's second film. We get to see the Underminer attack at the track meet in both the first and second films, and this side-by-side comparison is all you need to see just how much animation techniques developed in the years between the films. When looking at the Underminer himself, pay attention to the animation of his face, especially his mouth. Look how much the animators were able to improve on both the look and style of the villain. You can also see the animation changes by analyzing the city around him. The skyline is much more detailed and realistic in the second versus the first film. Number 13, a whole new character. Tony may be the Incredibles character who looks the most different between both films. He does have a much larger role in The Incredibles 2, so it makes sense creators would spend some more time animating the perfect love interest for Violet. While he's definitely still recognizable as Tony, a side-by-side of this scene shows you just how much the animation of his facial features, hair, and even body were changed.
Drive safely and goodbye. I enjoy our visits.
What are your thoughts on how the animation has changed between The Incredibles and The Incredibles 2? Do you think the creators were able to improve the animation while staying true to the characters and setting?
We all know and love the Disney and Pixar universe, but the truth is, depending on where you live in the world, those universes are completely different. From title to voice actor changes and everything in between, some of these films become almost unrecognizable when they premiere in other countries. Number 1. Different meanings. Coco might be one of Disney's #1 movies, but for some folks it reminded them a little more of number 2, if you know what we mean. Not that international audiences thought the movie was bad, but in Portuguese, Coco actually translates into the word poop. So instead of putting audiences through that, Brazil decided to change the title and Mama Coco's name to Viva instead. Number 2. Different animals. Zootopia should be in the running for the movie that paid the most attention to detail. That is, when it came to being conscious of its international viewers. The newscasters, including their voice actors, changed depending on what animal was native to that country. In the US, Canada, and France, they were a moose voiced by Canadian news anchor Peter Mansbridge. In the UK, he's still a moose, but was voiced by UK news reporter Vassos Alexander. In the version released in China, Peter Mansbridge still voices the part, but it was a panda instead of a moose. Australia and New Zealand have a koala that was voiced by their own news anchor David Campbell. In Brazil, it was a leopard, voiced by Brazilian journalist Ricardo Boechat. Finally, there was Japan's version that featured a raccoon dog and was voiced by Soka Kakariko. Number 3. American patriotism. The USA prides itself on how patriotic its citizens are, and this patriotism translates on the big screen as well. In Toy Story 2, during Buzz's speech, he has the American flag flying behind him, but for the rest of the world, his backdrop was a globe of the world instead. Number 4. Soccer versus hockey. Every country has a sport that's more popular than others, maybe even a national sport. So why shouldn't that be reflected in Disney and Pixar films as well? Inside Out thought it was pretty important. During the scene where we get a glimpse at Riley's dad's daydream, in the US, Canada, and Russia, he's thinking about hockey, but in the version released to the rest of the world, he was thinking about a soccer game instead. Number 5. Broccoli versus green peppers. Staying on the Inside Out thought track, there was another difference between the original film and the one released in Japan. During a memory where Riley is a baby, we see her reject the broccoli her parents are trying to feed her. But in Japan, she's refusing to eat green peppers. The reason? Culturally, kids actually love broccoli in Japan. Number 6. Oceania. Maybe Moana isn't as G-rated as we originally thought. In Europe, Moana's title was changed because Moana is the name of a famous European adult star that people thought referencing in a Disney film was a little too much. In Italy, Moana was changed to Oceania, and in the rest of Europe, it was changed to Vaiana. Number 7. Jar labels. Up pulled on all of our heartstrings, and the creators needed to make sure those heartstrings were pulled across the globe. So, while Ellie and Carl's Paradise Falls Save Up jar literally reads Paradise Falls in the English version, in the international versions, because of the language barriers, the label was instead an adorable hand-drawn photo of Paradise Falls. Number 8. English versus art. Like Up, Monsters University creators came up with a creative way to not just have subtitles for foreign audiences, but to actually engage them. In the US version, there's a platter of cupcakes that spells out, "Be my pal," but in the international version, the cupcakes are just faces drawn on with icing. Number 9. Translations. Circling back to Up, the Paradise Falls savings jar wasn't the only thing the creators changed depending on the country. Ellie's adventure book's front cover was also translated depending on what language was native to the audience. Number 10. Accents. In Cars, the UK wanted to stand out a bit from the rest of the world and add a little more of their culture into the film. So while the character Harv in Cars has an American accent, the Harv in the UK version has a UK accent. Their lines were even slightly different to match the dialogue of both countries. US Harv says, "Come on, kid, get in the trailer," and UK Harv says, "Come on, mate, get in the trailer." Number 11. Japan's Minty. Minty ZAKI brought all the sass when we met her during the Sugar Rush game, but in the Japanese version of Wreck-It Ralph, she became Minty Sakura. Not only did she have a name change, but she also looked completely different. Minty ZAKI was actually named after famous Japanese animator Hayao Miyazaki, so it's a little odd that they would decide to shake things up, but there's been no official reason behind the change. Number 12. Famous racers. International versions of Cars had a little fun with the character Jeff Gorvette. Instead of having a generic voice and look for each film, the characters were based on different famous race car drivers in each country. The Spanish version was based on Fernando Alonso, and the Chinese version was named Longue and designed after the Chinese flag. Number 13. English versus Greek. Just like Randall's Cupcakes, there was another change made regarding text in Monsters University. During the scare games, there's a banner that's hanging in the background. In English-speaking countries, the banner reads Scare Games, but in international versions, it was replaced with the Greek lettering that's common in university sororities. Number 14. English and French. In Ratatouille, the letter that Remy finds was probably in English when you saw it on screen, but the original version was in French. Instead of using subtitles, because the film does take place in Paris, the creators decided to just reanimate the entire letter to be English. Number 15. Bing Bong. Before Bing Bong's untimely demise in Inside Out, there's a scene where he's reading, maybe a little too late, a keep out sign. The language of the sign was changed depending on what country you watched the film in, but Bing Bong's movements were also edited to be in time or in pace with the words depending on the country. Number 16. Representing countries. Like in Cars, Planes also had a signature character that changed depending on which country the film was premiering in. In Planes, it's not Jeff Gorvette, but it's Rochelle. For each country, she pays tribute to its colors, flag, or other characteristics the country may have. Just another tidbit Pixar added to make everyone feel at home. Number 17. Zootropolis. This Zootopia change really had no rhyme or reason behind it. In the US, Zootopia is, well, Zootopia. But in the UK, Zootopia was released as Zootropolis. A spokesperson for Disney admitted they felt that the UK should have a unique title that would work for audiences. This change ended up extending further than the the UK. For instance, Zootropolis is also the name in Canada. Number 18. She was revoiced. Shrek is hilarious, and creators would most likely do anything to get an extra laugh from audiences.
Hey, how's it going?
That's why Ugly Sister 2 in Shrek 2 was revoiced. In the most common version, she was voiced by Larry King, but in the UK she was voiced by UK comedian Jonathan Ross to make it more relevant to a UK audience. Number 19. She was also revoiced. The ugly stepsister, also known as Doris, wasn't the only character to be revoiced for the UK version. While this is a small role, it was still also done to make the film more relatable to people from the UK. The red carpet reporter in Shrek 2 was originally voiced by Joan Rivers, but in the UK, her voice actor was UK television presenter Kate Thornton. Number 20. They're different in Poland. As you probably know, sometimes it's a little difficult to tell a story that would translate across all cultures, and the Shrek creators ran into this issue when making the film. Shrek is based on a few well-known fairy tales. Well, as it turns out, these fairy tales aren't actually that well known in Poland, so they needed to make some changes for that country. For instance, when Shrek threatens to kick Donkey's butt in the American version, the Polish version actually has Shrek threatening to take him to the slaughterhouse. In hindsight, it may seem harsh, but would make a lot of sense to Polish viewers. Well, that's all, folks. Can you think of any other changes that were made between countries in animated films?
When I've got you as a student, it's Godfrey Daniel!
The Cuphead game might be hard to beat, but their show on Netflix is very easy to binge watch.
Correct!
Not all cups are measured equal though, and there are some big differences between the Cuphead show and the game. Number 1, the root pack from the show isn't nearly as powerful as they were in the video game. And even then, they weren't the toughest bunch, so that's saying a lot. Even though they are one of the first bosses in the game and not as troublesome as the later foes like Grimlock and King Dice, the root pack gave the Cup duo more trouble in the game than in the show.
Gee, that sure is sad.
During the game, Cuphead and Mugman just fight one after the other in a 3-part battle, while in the TV show, the pack is responsible for sucking up all the nearby water other veggies were meant to have. Luckily, Elder Kettle reveals his plans for the enlarged pack of creeps, a veggie stew, which sends them packing without any supers or parries required. Number 2, Miss Chalice might be the character with more makeovers than any other in the franchise.
Hey, it's me, Chalice!
In her first appearance in the game, she's a ghost being attacked by some pariable ghosts. And her appearance is definitely meant to be of an older person. Not that we're experts on the aging of fine china. However, in her show debut, she's portrayed as a young prankster, able to shift in and out of ghost form at will. Then, in the DLC for Cuphead, in the Delicious Last Course, oh my gosh, we just realized DLC, Delicious Last Course. It's an acronym. These games are awesome. Anyway, in the DLC, she's interchangeable with the Cup duo as she takes on a corporeal form. And then finally in Season 2 of the Netflix show, well, she's pretty similar to Season 1, but she finally reveals herself as a half-ghost.
Hiya, fellas!
Essentially, it seems her canon and design changed when she was decided to become a playable character. Fair enough. Number 3. For a king, he sure gets pushed around a lot. King Dice is a villainous casino-owning crook in the video games, and a minion of the devil. He comes across as quite sinister, and there are more adult-oriented themes surrounding him and his own minions. In the games, before the duo can defeat him, they must fight humanoid cigars, poker chips, dice, and alcoholic beverages. Perhaps a metaphor for overcoming their own addictions? Probably not, but we do know Cuphead has a gambling problem for sure. This is dialed down in the show. While Cuphead does get ahead of himself while playing a game, it's not in a casino but at a carnival, a much more kid-friendly environment. Anyway, back to King Dice. In the show, King Dice has been watered down to an unsavory showman. Still up to no good, but without the more adult-oriented themes of tricking people into giving in to their addictions. Number 4, arguably the most important character in the game finally gets the spotlight he deserves in the show.
Close the door, boys.
Elder Kettle is a very important but small character in the video game. giving Cuphead and Mugman their snappy spell after Cuphead gets them into trouble. The ability to shoot while snapping is essential not only for gameplay, but also for the Cups to gather the required contracts and save themselves and eventually all of Inkwell Isle. In the show, his role is expanded, but he has a more comical side and gets very upset whenever Cuphead and Mugman fight.
Now, fighting!
The show implies that he's a retired war veteran and a decorated war hero. Which war? Maybe Vietnam? Number 5. Another character who gets a more complex makeover for the show.
Say goodbye to Cuphead.
Goodbye.
In the game, the devil is just straight up evil, without an ounce of humor and just out to make everyone his minion and own their souls. He also has the contract for both Cuphead and Mugman's souls, leading them both to journey out and save themselves. The devil from the show, however, is a much more fun, vibrant character who helps carry the humor of the show along with the Cup-based duo.
A Cyclops with an eye patch.
While the people of Inkwell Isle fear him just like the game version would never be caught painting Elder Kettle's fence for any reason, while the show version does. The game version appears a little more villainous in design, while the show's version has been softened because, say it with us, it's a children's show. Number 6. This is likely the first time you're hearing this character's name.
I am Quadratus the Great and Wise.
In the Cuphead video game, there is a face inside a pool about halfway through the game whose name is Quadratus. And he's a bit of a downer, because he'll tell you how many times you lost your health and had to start over since you started playing. He's not as much of a downer in the TV series, however. He's actually super helpful to the two Cups, as he tells them how to defend against the devil's scheme to take Cuphead's soul, by knitting an invisible sweater from a special thread. Nice to know he's not just there to explain what a bad gamer you are, for once.
Oh, how sweet. Now get knitting!
Number 7. Tough boss turned tough parent. One of the most infamously difficult bosses in Cuphead gets a bit of an edit from his video game appearance. The dragon Grim Matchstick is actually pretty similar to his video game counterpart in style, but a few things from the game don't get included. In the game, the boss begins as simply a one-headed dragon, easy enough. But as the fight progresses, Grim reveals 2 more heads, getting a Ghidorah-styled makeover. In this form, when one of the heads breathes fire, it turns into a literal red flamethrower. I mean, it was already a dragon, we wouldn't have questioned it. For the TV show, Grim makes an appearance as the parent to an egg Cuphead and Mugman snatch to give to Porkrind. The appearance is pretty faithful to his 3-headed form. However, when it burns Porkrind, there's no flamethrower-type transformation of any heads.
I hate those cups.
Which we think would have been a cool shout-out to the game. Alas, the game and show are simply not the same beast. Number 8. This next change is for the animation nerds out there. The big part of why Cuphead the video game was such a well-received and cool addition to indie gaming was the unique art style the creators wanted for the game. To achieve this ode to 30s style animation, they insisted on hand-drawing all the animations themselves. This is a time-consuming and exhaustive process, especially for an entire game. But the team persevered, and gamers flocked to their respective gaming devices to enjoy the visuals. The show, on the other hand, is computer animated using a similar design from the video games. While die-hard animation lovers were critical of the lack of commitment to the game's style, we can't blame them. CGI saves so much time which can be spent on other parts of a show to improve it. Also, the show is targeted to children. And children aren't generally critical of the subtleties of hand-drawn versus computer-generated animation, at least the ones we know. Number 9. This snap decision left fans a little puzzled. As we mentioned earlier, the run-and-gun style of the video game was based on the iconic snap power and sound gamers used to obliterate the colorful foes of Inkwell Isle. Of course, this is perfect for a violent video game where you go around beating people up to collect their souls for the devil.
Hello?
If you're making a kids show, however, you might not want to include a gun that works with the snap of your fingers. The show makes for more family-friendly content, and with that decision came the removal of Cuphead and Mugman's projectile snapping powers. They still snap in the show, but no dangerous energy-based projectiles come screaming out of there to attack people in the vicinity. Number 10. The Rock'em Sock'em duo from the game get a more regal look in the TV show. Ribby and Croak started as a boss battle on a boat in the original game. Their designs seem to be more of an attraction on the boat they live on than as managers or as the type of people who would run any type of show. They're wearing fighting gear and they launch their own projectile bullets much like the Cup duo do. But for the Netflix show, Ribby and Croak's got the Netflix redesign.
What's with those gloves?
Oh, we used to be pro boxers.
Going from what looked like dumb jocks to full-on suave business types. The two run a boat business with a steep entry fee. One Cuphead and Mugman don't have the funds for. The frogs are constantly bickering with each other, much like the TV version of Cuphead and Mugman, and have a backstory about their mother who hates to see them fight. However, they never put away the boxing gloves, as they still wear them and use them fairly often. Though the Cups do notice the boxing gloves pretty quickly. Number 11. Another big sell for gamers out there was the 30s style score of the video game. To match the older animation style of the game, the creators also had live orchestras playing full scores for various levels and boss battles. The game was able to gain some viral traction thanks to the popularity of instrumental songs like Botanic Panic and Floral Flurry, with blazing horns and jazzy, swinging music.
Stop!
The show does utilize a similar sounding score, but the depth of the music is certainly not there in comparison to the video game soundtrack. The show is not without its own musical charm, however, as it alone has fully sung songs by the villains of respective episodes, like the iconic, nearly Disney-level villain song sung by the Devil in episode 1. Number 12, and for the final difference from the game to the show, we're gonna talk about you. That's right, you. If you played the game, then you're probably not under 16 years old. If you watch the show, well, we don't want to judge. As we've discussed, the game can be played by anyone, but because of its more mature themes and difficulty, no one would describe it as a kid's game. But you know what is for kids? The Cuphead show on Netflix. The game is best enjoyed by older folks who appreciate older animation styles and know references to long-standing video game mechanics. While the show is filled with slapstick jokes and childish shenanigans the kiddies will enjoy. Different strokes for different folks. Those were the biggest changes we noticed between the Cup-based adventurers from their digital debut to their Netflix shenanigans. Any you noticed that we didn't mention? How do you feel about the changes? Let us know below. If you enjoyed, like and subscribe for more animated content. And thanks for stopping by The Things Animated.